Okay, this will be the best Photoshop tutorial we do so far. It's micro machines, and let's have a look at what we're going to be creating. So this is what we're going to be creating. Basically, everything is done except the racetrack, the car, the cones, and your name on the pencil. The pencil is a little too long, so we're going to have to move that up. And let's get started. So in the Photoshop folder, you'll see a few files. I want you to double click on desktop.psd. So it should just be called desktop for you. If you double click on it, it will open up in Photoshop automatically. Now, when we're in Photoshop, the first thing we need to do is firstly move this to the left a little bit. We also need to move this up a little bit, because what we're going to be doing, we're going to be putting a racetrack around there. Okay, so the first thing I think we should do is move this rubber to the left. So all we're going to do is select the rubber, get the selection tool, which is the second tool, select over the rubber, right click, and then click on layer via copy. So now I'll have another layer on top of my desktop layer. We can go ahead and get the moving tool, which is the first tool, and we can move this slightly to the left. Now we're going to come back to this in a second. Turn the eye off it so we can't see it anymore. Go to your desktop layer. We need to make this one disappear first. So what we're going to do is get a selection tool called the marquee tool. It's the third tool. It's a lasso tool. With the lasso tool, slowly go around the rubber like so. Get rid of the shadow as well. After you go around it, it should be selected. I want you to get the selection tool, which is the second tool. Right click and click on fill. This is an amazing feature in Photoshop. What it does, it's going to fill this area that you've selected with the background, with the surrounding areas. Make sure that content aware is selected here and then click OK. Photoshop will mathematically look around your selection and fill in the gaps, and it just done it then. And it's done it pretty well actually. Sometimes it doesn't do it as good, but today it's done it quite good, and we'll leave it like that. I mean, you can fix it up later on with the clone stamp tool and a few other tools if you like, but I think that's okay for now. Let's turn the eye back on our other rubber. Now, I'm just going to zoom in so we can see this. Control plus will zoom in for you if you didn't know that. Okay, so here is my rubber, and you can see we've got a rectangular line coming around the rubber, and that's because we've moved it and the colors have changed. To get this to blend in, we do two things. We erase the sides, but we erase it with a soft rubber. So let's go ahead and get the eraser tool. I want you to right click and make the tool a little bit big. Maybe as big as the rubber, not as big as the rubber, a little bit smaller, but roughly same size. And make the hardness around 10%, so make it soft. Now without actually clicking there, okay, without actually clicking on your rubber, click on the outside and you will see it will start to erase and fade it in. Make sure you're on layer 1. Do not erase your desktop layer, okay? So if I'm on my desktop layer, I'll be erasing my desktop and not the eraser. If you make a mistake, Control Alt Z to go back, Okay, Control Alt Z. We'll go back. So make sure you're on layer 1 and then do that. And you'll see you're starting to blend the image into the layer that's beneath it. Just click away, keep clicking until you get a really nice blend. And my one's blended quite well actually. I'm going to zoom back out to have a look at it. And it actually looks fantastic. It looks like we never moved it. If you're happy with it, what we're going to do is merge those two layers so they're not separate anymore. So all I got to do is hold Control down and click on the other layer, and that way both layers are selected. Then I right click one of the layers, it doesn't matter which one, and I just click on Merge, Merge Visible. It puts it all into one layer, and then I can go ahead and rename that layer. I can rename it by double clicking the name, layer 1, and then just call it desktop. Great. So we've just moved the rubber over to the left. We used the selection tool to fill in that gap so it doesn't look like we definitely moved something. It's looking quite natural at the moment. The next thing we want to do is move this pencil up a little bit. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. And this is going to let you guys practice a little bit more with the fill tool and a couple of the tools that we just learned just then. So first thing we're going to do is get the lasso tool, lasso around the pencil, get the selection tool, right click, or make sure you're on your desktop layer, right click, layer via copy. Now what you want to do is get the moving tool, make sure you're on layer 1 and move that up. Move it up about there. That's not bad right there. That's pretty good. Because we need a gap for the track to come around and swing around that way. So that's pretty good there. Let's turn the eye off layer 1 again. Go back to our desktop layer. What we need to do is make this part disappear. Okay, so I'm just having a look. We want from here to disappear. So again, get the lasso tool, go around this area, get the selection tool, right click, fill, content aware, hit OK. Make sure you're on the desktop layer, and Photoshop should, it hasn't done the best job, and if it hasn't, we can just right click again and hit fill, content aware, click OK. And just keep doing that until we get a good thing. We may have to do the lasso tool again and just see how it does it this time. If, for instance, your one isn't working out as well as you thought, there is another tool that we can use. We can use the clone tool. The clone tool is this one here. We would have used this in the text shadow tutorial. So if I click on the clone tool, what I want to do is hold Alt and it will ask me what I want to clone. What I think we should clone is maybe this area here. And all we do is left click that area once. Let go of Alt and you'll see that it's cloned that area. It's following my mouse. If I right click and just make it a little bit bigger, that's good. And what I'm going to do is just clone this area. Holding Alt, clone that area, and then apply it. Over the top. That's it. Now if I turn the layer back on, layer 1, What we want to do is, just like the rubber, we want to use the eraser tool, make it a little bit smaller, make it soft, and just from the edges there, I'm on the wrong layer, make sure you're on layer 1, just from the edges, just click, click, click until it blends into the background. You don't have to go too close, just stay outside of the brush and click. Keep clicking until it blends into the background. Remember, if you make a mistake, Control Alt and Z will go back. Okay, I'm going to zoom out, have a look at that. That doesn't look too bad actually, I like it. I'm going to keep it, I'm happy with it, so I'm going to hold Control, select both layers, right click and merge those layers. I'll rename it, call it Desktop. What we're going to do is lay a track down now. Now to do that, we use something called the pen tool. Okay, now we're going to create the track. Now we're going to use this thing called the pen tool. It's just above the T symbol. If we right click, you'll see the pen tool. Up top, make sure that you have shape layers selected because we're creating a shape with the pen tool. Okay, this is very important. After clicking pen tool, go up top, make sure shape layers is selected and not paths. Another thing is to choose the color. I'm going to choose black, but we're going to change the color later. Okay, let's have a look at what the pen tool can do. What we do is we click and we create a shape. So I'm going to click once here, I'm going to move the mouse up, I'm going to click again over here. To create the curve in my track, I'm going to click and drag. The pen tool is hard to use at first, but you'll understand it fairly quickly. I'm going to keep clicking and then another curve over here, click and drag, click, now our track is going to be a little wide, so don't forget to give it some room. It's going to come around the bend here and we finish up like that. What you want to do now is right click and rasterize that layer. It will save it as a picture that we can move anywhere we want. Let's rename that and call it track, racetrack, path, whatever you want. One thing we want to do is actually give it a little bit of a 3D feel. Now, what we can do is hold Control T on the keyboard. Hold Control down, press T. Now, with this, you can transform your track. You can move it around, things like that. What I want you guys to do is actually tip it a little bit, distort it. So, I want you to right click and go distort. After clicking on distort, from the middle bottom tab here, pull that up and you will see that we're starting to flatten the track. I want you to flatten that just a little bit and then hit enter. Get the moving tool and move it into position. The next thing we want to do is actually give it a bit more of a 3D feel. We're going to add a shadow. Now, just before we move on, if your track is not perfect and it's covering the pencil or the rubber or parts of the calculator or the folder, what we can do is Control T, right click, and we can warp it. And we can warp each point how we see fit. And you can do this with any picture in Photoshop. You can do it with text, you can do it with anything. So we're just warping it and then hit enter to save. If you don't like what you did, hit escape and it'll go away. So now what we're going to do is right click, go to blending options on our track. First thing we're gonna put is a drop shadow, and maybe increase the drop shadow so you can see the drop shadow increasing there. Might change the angle of the drop shadow as well. Maybe make it 90 degrees. Bring the distance in. You don't want the distance too much. That's pretty good there. And play around with the opacity, whatever you like. I'll make it about 75%, I think, roughly. Okay, I'm happy with that. You can play around with bevel and emboss as well. A good bevel and emboss might be a inner bevel. Let's have a look. Maybe pillow. No, I don't like pillow actually. Emboss and inner bevel looks pretty good. I'm going to choose an inner bevel. Really pops it out nicely. And then hit OK. The next thing we want to do is, for our track, we want to make it a grainy track. Now, you'd be familiar with this technique if you did the Photoshop text shadow tutorial. What we're going to do is we're going to import a picture. So let's file, place, and the picture we're going to import is in the Micro Machines Photoshop tutorial, and it's called road texture. Let's double click on that. And it should come in. Now stretch your picture out to the whole Photoshop canvas. Stretch it out completely. Hit enter. Drag road texture underneath your track. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the clone tool. We're going to clone your road texture onto your track. So I click on the clone stamp tool. I hold Alt down on my keyboard and I click the far left side of the gravel road. So I hold Alt and I click left click on the left side of the road. Make sure you're on the road texture. I go to my track layer, I hold Control down and I click in this little box. That selects my track. I'm going to right click and make the size of my clone tool bigger, and now I'm just going to paint inside my track. I'm going to go back and clone a little bit more, and go back here and paint inside. When I'm happy with that, get the second tool, the selection tool, and just click outside. We don't need the road texture anymore. We can delete that. Click on the layer and hit delete on the keyboard. It's gone. Now, the texture is a little too light, so I'm going to darken it. Let's click on our track layer. Let's go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast. Turn the brightness down, and we are going to turn the contrast up. And it should look more like an actual pavement road. That's pretty good. You can make yours darker or lighter if you want. I'm just going to hit OK. So now, let's sum up. We've moved the eraser to the left. We've made the pencil shorter. We've put a track in. The next thing we want to do is put the cones in. So let's go File, Place, and in the same folder you'll see a picture called Traffic Cone. Let's place that in. And there it is there. When it's in, just hit enter. What you want to do is rasterize this picture. So right click, hit rasterize, Now you'll see our cone has a white background. We need to remove this white background. What we want to do is use the magic wand tool. It's the fourth tool down. If you right click in there, you'll see magic wand. Make sure you're on the traffic cone. Click on the white area of your image. It will select all of the white area and just hit delete on your keyboard. The white area is now gone and we're left with the traffic cone. To get rid of this selection tool, click on the second tool, which is the marquee selection tool, and then click somewhere on your canvas. It's gone. Let's zoom out. So now I've got a traffic cone, one traffic cone. What I'm going to do is manipulate this traffic cone until I like it with shadows and all, and then when I like it, I'm going to duplicate it and put it all around my track. So let's zoom into my traffic cone and let's start doing some stuff to this. The first thing I want to do is put a drop shadow on it. So I'm going to right click on traffic cone, go to blending options. I'm going to click on drop shadow. And we're just going to create a shadow right underneath it. Perfect 90-degree angle. We don't want a different angle like this. Okay, keep it on 90 degrees. That's what we set the track to, and that's good. Distance, set the distance to about 10. Size is 5, spread is 0. Perfect. Let's enable inner shadow as well. Turn the distance to about 15 on that, and the size to about 10. Drop the opacity down just a little bit, maybe to about 65. Let's hit OK on that. The next thing we want to do is actually put a proper shadow. Now, this is a little bit tricky. We can't do a drop shadow because we need a proper shadow to hang down. So what we're going to do is right click on our traffic cone and duplicate this layer. Let's call this layer traffic cone shadow and hit OK. Now that we have a traffic cone shadow, what we're going to do is we're going to move it. We're going to Control T on your keyboard, hold Control down, press T, right click and flip it vertically. I want you to move it slightly on an angle, so rotate it and then move this down about there. Hit enter on your keyboard. Now it looks like we've just knocked the traffic cone down, but we're not finished yet. What I want you to do is right click and go to blending options. What we're going to do in blending options is put a color overlay on top. So click on color overlay. Now ignore the color it's put on top. What we want is a black color. So click in there and select black. Click OK. The next thing we want to do with our shadow is put it underneath our traffic cone. So just drag that layer down. Get the moving tool, move it slightly underneath. You can use the up, down, left and right arrows on your keyboard to get more precise. Now, if your shadow is too dark like my one is, what you want to do is drop the opacity down. Okay. I'm going to drop it down to about 75%. You drop it down to whatever you like. When you're happy with your cone and the way it looks, what I want you to do is hold Control down and select both of them. Right click and merge those layers. Right click and merge those layers. You now have one perfect traffic cone. Now what we're going to do, is basically move that traffic cone, Control T, resize it, hit enter to save it. I'm going to resize it a little bit more. Now we've got one perfect traffic cone. What we want to do now is right click and duplicate it and move it. Right click, duplicate, keep moving. So put some cones all around the track. And we just keep duplicating these cones. We don't need too many. Okay, now I've got my cones in place, but there's a couple of problems. One of the problems is the shadow here is going over to the rubber, so we're going to have to erase that part there. A couple other problems is that, look how many layers I've got. We need to get organized a little bit. What I'm going to do is down the bottom here, I've got an option. It's called create a new group, or what I like to call it is a folder. So I'm going to click on that button. I'm going to rename this group and call it traffic cones. I'm going to click on the first traffic cone there, hold shift down on my keyboard and select the last traffic cone. And that should select all the traffic cones in the middle. I'm going to click and drag those cones into that folder. Now that they're in that folder, I can collapse that folder at any time so that it's not crowding up my layers. What I want to do is right click and actually merge all of these layers. So I go merge group. Now it's just one image and I can move that image wherever I want. What we're going to do is get the eraser, make sure it's not too big, hardness is down, and we're just going to erase parts of the areas that we shouldn't have shadows. Okay, so they're fine. I'm going to drop the opacity down on my eraser and just erase parts of these shadows because they're a little bit too dark. So what I've done is I'm on the eraser, I've dropped the opacity of the eraser down to about 15% and I'm just erasing some of the shadows because the shadows I think were a little bit too dark. If yours are fine then leave it, but I don't like the shadows on mine too much, so I'm just deleting them a little bit. Okay, our cones are done. The next thing is to put in our car and then put in our name and we're done. Okay, now we want to bring the car in and then put your name on the pencil. Let's bring the car in first. Let's go File, Place. Click on Toy Car and let's place that into our document. Hit Enter to save it. Now, guess what we've got to do? We need to remove the white. So what we're going to do is get the Magic Wand tool. We're going to click on the white area. Oh, before we do that, we need to rasterize. So let's rasterize our layer. Okay, now with the magic wand tool, let's click and hit delete. Now you'll see that the magic wand has left some areas. Now what we can do with those areas, we can get the eraser out and we can erase. I've got to put the opacity back up on my eraser. There we go. Make sure the hardness is on full as well. That's a better one. There we go. Use Control Plus to zoom in, and that way you can really delete those areas properly. Try not to get your car. If you make a mistake, Control Alt Z will go back. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's pretty good for now. That's good enough for now. Now obviously our car is way too big, so we need to transform it and scale it down. Control T, and then let's scale it down. Let's move it onto our track, about there, making sure that we're not covering parts of the cone or anything like that. Keep scaling it down, and that's pretty good. What we can also do is just do a warp. If we right click and warp, what we can do is just squash some parts there. There we go, and hit OK on that. One thing we can do is right click, go layer properties, blending options, and give it a drop shadow. And if we turn global light off, we can change the angle, make the distance a little bit more. I mean, 80 degrees seems pretty good for me, but you decide. You can stretch out your shadow, you can make it lighter if you want. 63 looks pretty good. Hit OK, zoom back out, see how it looks. So, we've got the car in there, it's looking pretty good. The next thing is to put your name on the pencil. Let's zoom into the pencil, Control Plus. Let's get a T, the text tool. What I want you to do, once the text tool initializes, I want you to draw on a canvas for you to write your name on. Okay, I'm just going to draw a small canvas and type in Osman in capital letters. Now, if you can't see anything, just hold Control A on your keyboard and change the size. So don't make it too small, don't make it too big. Looks like 36 or 40 will do. 48, yeah, 48's pretty good. Yeah, 48's real good. Okay, I'm going to save that, get the moving tool. I'm going to move it down, Control T, and rotate it. I'm going to rotate it about there, and then hit enter to save it. Now obviously that's not all we're going to do. Let's go into the blending options, right click, blending options. Just move this to the side a little bit. First thing we want to do is a bevel and emboss. Let's click on bevel and emboss. But let's change the style of the bevel and emboss to a pillow emboss. Kind of makes it look like the text is inscribed. The next thing we want to do is play around with the depth of the bevel and emboss, which will make it seem like it's been really etched into the pencil a lot or less. I'm going to keep it about 110. That seems pretty good, 110. And then hit OK. One last thing we could do is change the color of the text. Now I've got it at white at the moment, but what you could do is just get the text tool again, click inside here, click on the color. Now instead of picking some random color like red or blue, which you can do, what I would want to do is maybe pick a color of the pencil, but a darker part of the pencil. Now you can see this ink drop comes up. If I click on a certain part of my Photoshop canvas, it will copy that color. You could copy the purple from this button, you could copy the red from the car, or the orange from the cones. What I'm going to do is just copy a dark part of the pencil. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit OK on that. And there it is, it's etched on. I can use the moving tool to move it around. I'm just going to zoom out. And there it is. There is my Photoshop canvas finished. Now one thing we can do when we are completely finished is burn some of the parts of our Photoshop image. The burn tool is really cool. This is the burn tool right here. If you right click that one and select burn tool, what you can do with the burn tool is basically burn certain areas. Now if I go to my desktop, I can make the size of the burn bigger, and I can just burn certain areas. And what it's going to do is just darken certain areas of my Photoshop canvas. Okay, can really make things pop out a little bit more. Okay, I can go to my track and make certain parts of my track darker by burning those areas. I could go to my car and maybe burn the back of it, give it a bit of a shadow look. Could go to my text and maybe burn that, or more importantly, could maybe burn the pencil itself. And that's it, we're finished. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. What you want to do is now save it, go File, Save As. Remember, if you're finished, save it as a JPEG or a PNG file. If you haven't finished, keep it as a Photoshop file so you can come back and edit it later.